and is therefore no better than or no less than me. Because ultimately, by virtue of being awake, they aren't introducing anything extraneous to the Father's will into everything that proceeds from them. That's the end of the answer.
Thank you. I felt a strong draw to the foundation here. I've got to know a lot of the people online. I feel a strong connection with Paul and Susan and many of the people here. Is there something, and most of it is the foundation's built around Raj. It's built around you. And you're wonderful, and I love listening to you, but I don't feel the draw to Raj so much as the draw towards Paul, even though it's hard to see where the line is drawn in that identity. Could you maybe say something about the Ryan-Paul relationship in the context of the foundation?
Well, understand that, quote, the foundation, unquote, is a sufferer to be so now. It is something that has to exist, let us say, on paper, because the government requires an accounting of the movement of money. And that's all it is. The substance or the activity that seems to have called forth a need for that accommodation to the government is simply Paul being the expression of love by virtue of letting the Father shine through. And so you would naturally find, let us say, an attraction to him. Because he's the one who's letting it happen. He's the one who is letting the presence of God be where he is with as little resistance to it as possible. In doing that, he's finding out that he's not who he thought he was. And he's beginning to learn from experience what he is. Even though it doesn't provide him with a definition, just an ability to be it, which is what he's doing right now. The time will come when I will not need to participate firsthand with him in his doing this. And that, of course, is ultimately the point. Even though at that point, he will be aware that I am constantly with him, experiencing everything about it with him, but not with a need to facilitate the process. Just a moment. So there really is no, quote, foundation for you to have a relationship with. But there is Paul, and there is Paul and me at the present time.
And the people who gather around.
Indeed. Indeed. You must understand that it is for Paul disconcerting at times for all of what he calls his life. He has been called Paul. And so when somebody says Paul, his habit is to respond as from the place of what he thinks he is as Paul. And when he is allowing me to speak, and he is not introducing anything into the picture from the perspective of who he has thought he was as Paul, he feels at one with what is happening. But it doesn't feel like Paul to him, in the same sense that his concept of Paul, of so many years' experience or duration, has felt like him. And so part of this process is one of allowing him to have the experience of being, not from a place of conditionings, from a place of conditioned responses or habitual thinking patterns, but to be present with and available to everyone without the exercise of control, and with the resultant discovery that without control being exercised, existence doesn't collapse, and that therefore it is safe for him to not be in control and to discover that he doesn't cease to exist, and that not only is he not who he thought he was, he is an indescribable presence of conscious awareness that can be utterly appropriate in every situation with complete safety and fearlessness, and that therefore he is a verb and not a noun. Nouns seem to anchor you in security. And that's why you conceive of yourself as a thing. But what you are is a movement of being. So when you ask a question about Paul, it doesn't make sense to him like it used to. And to talk about the difference between Paul and me, because the experience for him is not one of difference. And yet he hasn't been swallowed up in me. I haven't become him. And there's absolutely no confusion in the experience. He is learning how to be a verb. And know what that means without having a way or a need to define it or explain it. Because a verb cannot be defined or explained where a noun can. I will say, as time goes on, or as things proceed, I will be less the focus when Paul is speaking. Just a moment. That's me, Paul, saying just a moment. Simply because my help will not be needed in order for him to be the unobstructed presence of God. And when I do speak, as I'm doing right now, apparently through him, it will be because it fulfills purpose relative to whoever it is I am speaking to, rather than because it is facilitating Paul's shift from a private, personal sense of self to the impersonal, you might say, infinite presence of God, illuminating what is real by acknowledging what is real everywhere. That is the best way I can put it into words.
Thanks. Last question. Is it harder for Paul when the identity Paul is the subject of the discussion, of the question?
To some degree, but not significantly, no. It used to be very unsettling, but not now, no.
Thanks.
Will we all have to go through this process to awaken?
Does it look so awful?
Is that Paul or Raj?
That if it were Paul, Paul would say, that is me.
Do we all have to go through this process?
Yes. It's called glorifying God.
We need to be shown this way.
Of course. You know, you have these wonderful wonderful songs and hymns, Hosanna unto the highest, and talking about praising the Lord and praising God. It is joyous. And you truly have nothing else to do but let God be you. If you're going to wait for an example, be patient, because Paul is not yielding 100% quickly. But I promise you that when he does, it will be obviously worth it.
It's not like I can just wake up right now and just do it without going through the process.
Well, let's put it this way. Some people are more stubborn than others, and Paul is a workout, if I may put it that way. And so you must not make any assumptions based on what you observe with Paul. Paul is not miserable. His ego is sometimes. But this is not a miserable experience for Paul.
No, I wouldn't think it would be. He's close to you. I was just, there's going to be somebody that's awake and that's going to be with me and show me and go through what you and Paul are going through in order to wake up.
Every step of the way.
That's my question. Okay, so that's the way it's going to work. Versus just waking up.
That's right.
I'm not going to do it on my own. I mean, it can't work that way.
You can't do it on your own because that's an independent act. An independent action was what caused the dream, so to speak, the false sense of separation. You are not going to be able to do it alone.
Need to get down to it.
That's why this process, if you want to call it a process, is so insulting to the ego. The ego must take credit for things in order to exist. The ego will not be able to take credit for this because there won't be any independent action associated with it, and therefore no one to take credit.
So as we minimize the ego and not go to it
Which
and
is
open up
not
to
your
it,
individuality, but yes.
that's how I would allow more of guidance, yes, of course, come through.
No, you can't minimize the ego first. You have to ask for guidance first, and as you let it in, the minimization of the ego begins. The key really lies in each one of you arriving at a point where you need help and you actually say, help. That's when you really need help is when you are is when you're most able to see the value in not relying upon yourself. And that is a wonderful point to arrive at. Because as long as you think you can handle things pretty well yourself, you won't say help, and you will be completely blocked from escaping the illusion of being separate.
I understand asking for help, and I do ask for help. I never put it all together that process that I see Paul and you doing, that is what we're all to do. I just never put that together, but I can see that's it. And it's I always thought it's being really companioning with God, not like it's letting in an awakened being to travel with me. So I'm seeing now there's a distinction that it's an awakened being that I let in, that I open.
You can let God in as well. You can let God in. You can let the Holy Spirit in. You can let your guide in. And there are others who are not your guides who stand ready on your behalf, because all of us who are awake look forward to full involvement with you, not just occasional involvement with you, you see. It's not just that you let us in, you let us through. You must defer to us. And ultimately what that means is you must defer to God. And that's why it seems difficult, because you have to abandon your apparent right to authorize things yourself. Don't look so sad.
In asking for help, how is that different from the beseeching prayer? And weren't we taught to give thanks in advance? That's where, the help thing has a connotation that I don't think is clear in my mind.
The beseeching prayer is a request for help by remote control. In other words, you pray to God for God to intervene on your behalf, whether you join with Him or not, whether you commune with Him or not, whether you connect with Him or not. You see, when you ask for help the way I'm talking about asking for help, you're asking for help that you're going to get a response to within you. In other words, there's going to be involvement. You're going to ask for help, and then you're going to listen for the answer so that you get the answer, which tells you that by virtue of the experience, you're not alone. It's not like the prayer at night where you go to bed and say, God, please help Mary and Sally and Judy and Henry and good night. You see?
How does that differ from when we are taught to give thanks in advance for what already exists as our way of communing, as opposed to asking for help?
That's not a way for asking for help. That's priming the pump.
So are you saying it's inappropriate to give thanks in advance?
It is absolutely appropriate.
Okay, then it's
to give thanks in advance. But then you must stand there ready to be in receipt of the answer to the prayer, which will mean involvement.
Then ask for help. Give thanks and then ask for help to fulfill it is no.
You realize what you're asking for God to provide to you is something that God has never withheld from you. And you're receiving it as not a present response to God in place of His not having given it to you before. When you thank God for what He has always been being and for the fullness that has always been yours, that is your way of acknowledging the truth, the fact that you could never have been lacking. But But you must be open to receive. And the receiving is going to be an involvement. It's not going to be something given to you and delivered by the postman. It's something that is given to you by the source of the gift that requires you to be consciously involved with the giver of the gift. Because unless your isolation has been broken and replaced by communion, by involvement, there's no healing, there's no answer to the prayer. We're going to leave this at this moment and take a break, but if you wish to pursue it after the break, we will continue. Okay. Did you have any?
Thank you. We were talking about opening to help. And this may be a little convoluted, but I'm going to ask the whole question. When you begin your meditation, Paul, you ask for allowing only that which expresses the Christ consciousness and is in harmony with the purpose of being. To me, when I say that, it leads me to think that there might be something else that could be that I'm not allowing for. Even the fact that something could express the Christ consciousness and not be in harmony with the purpose of being indicates that there might be two something or others. I've heard people ask for protection, triple protection. I know about souls hanging on and not departing, but I don't think that's what we're talking about here. Then the next question would be giving thanks.
Well, let's take care of that first.
Okay.
Paul does not make this statement as a means of protection, but as, let us say, a blessing on what is to follow. It is an expression of his intent from that point forward, or for that time that follows. In so many words, instead of saying he isn't allowing for the dark forces or some other entities, he's really saying that during this period of time, he wants to have nothing to do with his best concepts, his best judgments, his pet theories. You see what I'm saying? That this is a time which he is devoting to one thing only: the experience of truth. Continue.
Thank you. That's very clear. The next thing would be, do we say together, give thanks, and now that we're thankful that we can ask for help, thy will, my will? Is it two separate states of openness? How do those come together? And then the last one would be, how can I most effectively hear? Because I don't seem to be hearing as well as I used to or would like to. What my involvement should be.
Well, you know, when I thanked God before calling Lazarus forth and acknowledged God there, in effect it was similar to what Paul does when he says, I allow only for such and such.